Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. It is indeed an honor as well as a pleasure for me to address this august symposium being held in memory of the great Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud. We are reminded of his deeds and legacies and the role they will play in furthering the cause of our ethno-cultural region of Khorasan. This occasion has given us the opportunity to bring up several important matters. Below, I will attempt to dilate on the identification and placement of Khorasan with respect to the Swati Tajiks and their history as an organized ruling power of this area, the condition of existing local historiography and my personal contribution, as well as the role of geopolitical vested interests in maintaining the status quo and the effects of the momentous geopolitical changes now underway on the local scene. When referring to the term Khorasan, academics imply the eastern portion of the ancient ethno-cultural polity of the ancient Persian Empire called Iranshahr or Iran Zamin, which took shape and consolidated itself from 550 before the Common Era onwards. Its history is thankfully very well documented, but there do remain dark recesses and corners where till now light was not at all effectively shed. Our work in such situations is largely of a forensic nature, if I may characterize it as such, but we can still hope to effectively detect and reconstruct lost or deficient parts of the narrative in this regard by referring to the existing consensual corpus of current knowledge as our guide. We will examine the history of the central and lower portions of historic eastern Khorasan, the territory of which now constitutes the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan, and the following northeastern provinces of Afghanistan, namely Logar, Laghman, Nangarhar, and Kunar. Presently, all these areas are lumped together and arbitrarily described as Pashtun, yet not even much is further said about who Pashtuns actually are. However, while the Pashtun label may overtly seem correct, the matter needs closer inspection. The areas named still form a local cultural and linguistic contiguity, even within the larger Pashtun matrix. In ancient times, they were part of Gandhara, an area with an Indo-Iranian majority population, which was itself an extension of Bactria, even though Gandhara is known to have remained a Persian satrapy in its own right for the greater part of the latter half of its 2300 years of existence. As such, it was subject to manifold mainstream Persian and other Eastern Iranian influences over a prolonged period of time, and therefore it can be regarded as a part of historical Khorasan, even though it is hardly mentioned as such. We still see those Iranian influences here, but they need proper identification and contextualization, which has yet to be afforded them. I will first of all introduce the proper historiography of the region alluded to above by introducing the Swatis. I am the descendant of medieval Tajik sultans who belonged to the Sawadi or Swati community of Dekhans, who were the local administrative class of the Gandhara area from the time when it was a satrapy of the Persian empires before Islam, from 550 before the Common Era to 651 of the Common Era. Their Khans were a landowning and aristocratic class of ancient Persia. The Swatis are thought to have originated in the Sawad region of ancient Mesopotamia / Assyria, which was located between the rivers Euphrates and Tigris, and have come to their present locations via Sistan, now called Greater Kandahar. hence their name Swati, quote-unquote Swati, which is actually a recent Pashtun-inspired corruption of the word, quote-unquote Sawadi. The Swati ruling families spoke Gabri or Gavruni, which is a Zoroastrian dialect of Dari, still spoken in Yazd and Karman in Iran. The rest of their people were the Shalmanis, who spoke many extinct languages, such as Laghmani, Dehqani, and also modern Dari. These have been recorded by Babur in his Baburnama. Due to this reason, the fact that the Swatis converted to Islam late in the day, they were called Gabri, which pejoratively meant being Zoroastrian, a name which they still use to denote their main tribal section. The other two tribal divisions of Swatis are called Mitravi and Mumiali. Mitravi denotes the followers of the rival Iranian solar deity Mitra. Thus, the Shalmani Swati community appears to have comprised a confederation of several ancient Dehqan communities and lineages who were ruled over by Swati princes of the Jahangiri royal clan. I myself belong to the Papini sect of the Jahangiri royal clan, descended from the Swati Sultan Bahram Gabri. In 1190, two Muslim Swati brothers, the princes Bahram Gabri and Fahkal Gabri, became vassals of the Ghori sultans, and under their tutelage jointly established the vassal kingdom of Sawat Gabar, which extended from the Kabul Parwan area at the western end to River Jhelum and Baramulla in Kashmir in the east. This kingdom was a diarchy ruled by the two brothers. Sultan Bahram had his capital in Papin, Ningarhar. It's a village which still exists, while Sultan Fahkal, who was also called Pakhal, his capital was at Manglaur in Swat Valley. In 1339, a Swati Dehqan named Shahmir established the first Muslim Sultanate of Kashmir, where his Shahmiri dynasty patronized the famous Persian saint Mir Sayyid Ali Hamadani in conveying the message of Islam and Persian culture to the soil of Kashmir. Papin later broke away and became a Timurid fief, while the original Sawat Gabar kingdom had by that time diminished in territory to between the Spinghar range of the northern Suleiman Mountains and River Indus. It was renamed Pakhli Sarkar because it comprised of the territorial jurisdiction formerly conquered by Sultan Pakhal and became a province of Shahmiri Kashmir in the decade of the 1350s, but continued to be ruled locally by the original Swati Gabri royal clan. In about 1480, a displacement of the Sarabani-Afghan tribes by the Timurid rulers from the Kandahar region began when Ulugh Beg II, who was ruler of Kabul, massacred the major tribal elders of the main Sarabani tribe, the Yusufzai. The refugees from this tribe fled to Pakhli Sarkar, where they were granted refuge and lived for 30 to 40 years doing odd jobs. Finally, in 1519, the increasingly assertive Yusufzai youth, who had grown up by then, staged a peasant uprising against the Swati rulers, who had by then become complacent and easygoing. The Yusufzai Afghans had the connivance of the Timurid prince Zahiruddin Babur, who invaded Pakhli Sarkar and helped them topple the last Sawadi king, Sultan Owais. The ex-Sultan fled north towards Wakhan, where he and his descendants established a remote fief and fell into obscurity. The remaining evicted Sawadi or Swati population retreated to the peripheries and jungles, from where they conducted sporadic guerrilla action against the Yusufzai usurpers for about 120 years. Following the Yusufzai victory, the rest of the Sarabani tribes flooded into Peshawar Valley and usurped its lands for themselves in much the same way that William the Conqueror had done with Saxon England. In 1647, a local Tajik saint, whose forefather was a prominent divine from Tirmiz, called Jalal Baba, helped organize the Swatis militarily and enabled them to conquer territory from a small principality ruled by Karluk Turks, which was located in the Hazara region of the Upper Punjab, bordering on Kashmir. Although there is some dispute as to the role of this individual in this action. Hazara is where 95% of the Swati population now resides. The Swatis now comprise a confederacy of influential and rich feudal clans and own the Swati name proudly, but are rather vague as to its true historical provenance. As opposed to elsewhere, where the term Tajik now normally connotes a linguistic and cultural identity. For Swatis who now live in an Indo-Aryan milieu, the term Tajik now denotes the genealogical aspect of a feudal landowning upper social caste. Swatis are reluctant to use the name Tajik because there are many other Tajik communities in Pakistan who belong in the lower menial craftsman categories, such as the Ahingaran or blacksmiths and the Kamangaran, who are armorers or weaponsmiths, found in districts Upper and Lower Dir of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Swatis are conceited about their aristocratic and royal backgrounds and do not wish to mingle or be seen with the lower class types. Those who are aware among them are content to use the term Dekhan in place of Tajik. The other major Indo-Aryanization of the Swatis that they have undergone is their adoption of the culture and the Upper Punjabi language called Hindukush. A great many speak Pashto, but usually with a heavy Punjabi inflection. Their original Gabri language has died out long ago. The reason many ascribe to this is the frequent Swati tendency to marry Yusufzai women. To Pashtun outsiders, many Swatis still try to pass them off as quote-unquote Yusufzais and quote-unquote Swati Pashtuns. However, the last 6 years of our work has seen a rising interest among Swatis to reclaim their occluded Tajik identity. There were several Swatis who remained behind in their original territories and did not cross the Indus. These were mostly rivals of the royal family and those in power, and they reached an accord with the Pashtun usurpers. In return, the Pashtuns rewarded them by assimilating them into their tribes and giving them their own new Pashtun-Afghan identity, plus full tribal privileges and landed estates. Their different genetics, however, now show up when tests are conducted in this regard. The Afghan tribes which mainly absorbed renegade Swatis are the Yusufzais, Mohmeds and Salarzais. Many other Swatis recast their pedigree as Arab Qureshi or Sayyid and joined the clerical aristocracy, which is a feature of this society. This was mainly done to preserve their prestige. Such clerical aristocrats are not regarded as pedigree Afghans by the society, but their power and pelf is immense on account of their so-called quote-unquote proprietorship of religious concerns. Besides Tajiks, they consist of Arab immigrants and other Indo-Iranians. Besides these absorbed Swatis, there are many other communities of Tajik origin in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and elsewhere in Pakistan, both ancient and recent. Many Swati clans still live in the Dir region of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We find a major Yusufzai clan by the name of Degan Khel, which is self-explanatory. Their genetic lineages are Swati. Further south, there are Degan Khel clans among the Waziri Pashtuns. The secondary clan of Banu regards itself as the descendants of Cyrus or Sikandar Zulqarnain. Besides these, there are numerous other minor Iranian tribes and clans in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which, although they speak Pashto, are rudely dismissed by quote-unquote pedigree Pashtuns as being quote-unquote stray. These include the Shalmani, Mulagori, Mashwani, Farmuli, Baisud, Sargani, Rohani, Katani, and Rudbari. Elsewhere in Balochistan province, we find the Balochi-speaking Dehwar and Naushirwani communities which proudly own a Tajik or Persian identity. Since this paper deals only with Tajiks who have Pashtunized their identity, I have not mentioned the various Pamiri Tajik communities resident in northern Pakistan, such as the Wakhis, the Gojalis, and the Hunzais. Ironically, Pamiris are technically closer to Pashtuns in classification. In addition, the Ghilzai or Ghalji Confederacy of the Pashtun-Afghan ethnicity is perhaps among their most historically and accomplished sections. Although now staunch Pashtuns, they claim descent from a Ghori prince and have in all likelihood absorbed the remnants of the ancient Suran Sakapathian community of Sistan. We will now address the nature and problems of the local historiography, as that forms the basis of historical inquiry. This will reveal why the actual facts were eclipsed. We shall endeavour to examine as to why our historiographic predicament is so poor. There are two sources of historiographic narrative affecting the situation under discussion: the official Pakistani version and the traditional Pashtun narrative, which is informal and folkloric. Both of these are faulty, to say the least. We will begin with the official narrative. Pakistan has existed as a nation-state since the division of British India in 1947. Its historiography is limited to the subject of quote-unquote Pakistan studies, which is taught as the standard syllabus from school to postgraduate levels. Quote-unquote Indo-Pak history is also a subject for bureaucratic competitive examinations, which candidates here learn by rote. Pakistan studies does not tell the student what comprises the present-day makeup of Pakistan. It is designed to promote the largely fictitious and fanatical worldview of a certain social and ethnic lobby which dominates this country. Besides being vague and insufficient, its layout is contrived primarily to inculcate a rather simplistic worldview which gives precedence to the ethnic Indic element of this polity and justifies the necessity of dividing modern India on a Hindu and Muslim basis. Though Pakistan lies on the watershed between the Iranian and Indian cultural and ethnic spheres, only half of this artificial nation state is Indian. That on the left bank of the Indus is Iranic. As far as its historical aspect is concerned, Pakistan studies begins with cursory mentions of Ashoka and Gandhara civilization. But these are not fully or systematically expounded upon as the case should be. Then the official narrative jumps to the arrival of Islam in the subcontinent, which is ascribed to the young Umayyad general Muhammad bin Qasim in 712 of the Common Era. That is not even the full picture of Islam inroads into this region, only into Sindh. Ghaznavi and Ghori are then mentioned, but little is said about whom they really were and what they actually did. Thereafter, we are told about the majesty of Timurid Muslim rule in India and how that, quote unquote, laid the foundation for Pakistan. Then the cruel British arrived and displaced the Timurids. The discussion is rounded off by connecting the preceding narration to the early 20th century Indian political events involving Jinnah, Iqbal, Gandhi and Nehru. The whole subject is very black and white, superficial and shrill in its presentation and format. This is not history. It is not a critical or objective appraisal, but is designed to misrepresent facts and induce a shrill emotionalism and inflame coarse passions on the level of the street. Nothing is usefully said about whom the various peoples of Pakistan really are, their present status, their culture, their actual ethnic identities, how and where they originated and when. Facts are actually blurred and ambiguity is promoted with a deliberate intent. A famous Pakistani historian, K.K. Aziz, has written a book about this state of affairs entitled The Murder of History in Pakistan. On the other hand, the folk historiography of the dominant Pashtun ethnicity of the region is separate from the above, but not much better. Existing Pashtun historiography is an extremely scant and backward genre, being entirely informal and folkloric in nature and orally disseminated by people of semi-literate or substandard educational status. Those who have a standard modern education simply ignore it as non-serious as its presentation is largely in the domain of fairy tales and fantasy. It has no government recognition or any formal academic treatment at all. No effort has been made to integrate or refine it into any officially supported or academic historical discourse, as would normally be the case elsewhere. All of the four major Pashtun-Afghan tribal confederacies have their own ancestral legends, which are also interconnected, but the relatively best documented of these exists among the eastern division of the Sarabani Confederacy, now occupying Peshawar Valley, Swat, Ningarhar, and Kunur. This is a collection of tales relating to the arrival of their chief tribes in Peshawar Valley and Swat and their takeover of these regions from the Swatis with the overthrow of their kingdom. Dating effectively only to the events of the first 2 decades of the 16th century of the Common Era, it comprises a few recently written texts and commentaries and is related as oral tradition, mostly by semi-literate elders in remote rural men's houses or hujras, as when they gather in the evenings to relax and drink tea after a day's work. Low-grade literature, both old and new, published and unpublished, exists in profusion in the market and in private possession. Like all traditions, such material also hides a great deal of metaphor, factual fragments, anecdotes, and other useful information. But it needs expert scholarly treatment to discern properly. For the most part, these traditions are a set of crudely embellished legends. They tell about how the name Afghan is derived from that of quote-unquote Afghana, who was supposed to be the son of the biblical Saul, who in turn was the ancestor of the Hebraic Pashtun patriarch Qais. Qais is said to have met Prophet Muhammad in person and converted to Islam at his hands, and then married the daughter of the famous Umayyad general Khalid bin Walid. The Prophet then titled Qais Batan, which means a ship's keel in Arabic. Listeners will be told in all seriousness how Pashto was originally the language spoken by the jinns and demons of Prophet Solomon, who in turn taught it to Afghana. If a serious scientific and rational listener interjects, he will often be shouted down and even assaulted. He may well be accused of blasphemy and insulting Islamic religion and Pashtun honor. Such discussions often get heated. The more educated and refined individuals among them will conjecture and debate wildly and inconclusively as to whether the Pashtun-Afghan ethnicity is Greek, Hebrew, or Aryan. The quote-unquote narrative then jumps from Qais to the 16th century when Yusufzai Afghans and Timurids arrived in the Gandhara area, that is Peshawar Valley, and took it over from the previous inhabitants. Such comical and worthless debates last for hours but are mostly exercises in whiling away the time or in loud-mouthed competition. To mention Khorasan or what it actually represents in such an environment is like trying to mention calculus to a screaming, nursing infant. Many scholars have attempted to explain the Pashtun-Afghans, but without recourse to Iranology and the history of Persia. They are not even aware of its subject matter or relevance. That is a major flaw and undermines any such investigation. Apart from Sir Olaf Caro's The Pathans of 1956, very little exists in the way of mainstream scholarship regarding Pashtun-Afghan history, even though a great deal of scholarly material abounds, which is out of public view. Sir Olaf's book is very well known and displayed on bookshelves everywhere, but very few Pashtuns are actually familiar with its contents. A pathetic attempt was made by the Durrani establishment in Kabul to concoct a pseudo-academic history for its own political ends. It produced some comic results, notably the infamous quote-unquote epic Pata Khazana or Hidden Treasure. All of the above goes to show that with such quote-unquote historiographies, matters can get nowhere. To equate such a situation to serious or formal historical discourse would be a travesty, and it reflects amply upon the true state of both Pashtuns and Pakistan. The arrival and rise to dominance of the Pashtuns in this region, as well as the creation of Pakistan, had served to eclipse facts. The degrading influence of Pashtun culture has also rendered the norms of proper discourse forgotten, and the crude treatment of history is a typical manifestation of what I'm talking about. The above described situation is despairingly hopeless. Over the last six years, my deep interest in this subject and wish to attain clarity in it has led me to focus my entire efforts solely on getting to the bottom of the actual regional history in an academic manner. I have spent whatever I had to pursue this goal, although I am alone and not a very rich person, and the resources and efforts of singular researchers are severely circumscribed and constrained as regards the scope and capacity needed. I feel that I have managed to lay a satisfactory framework to serve as a foundation upon which others can now build further. I was preceded in this effort by another dedicated individual, a man I was never to meet, who privately amassed a copious body of material at a time when the internet did not yet exist or was in its infancy. This former government official and college professor was Muhammad Akhtar Swati, who was a diabetic and used to hire ambulances out of his own pocket for traveling to remote locations to do his field work. Like me, he spent most of his inheritance and finally published a book in Urdu in 2002. This book was not hidden from anybody, but lay around unappreciated and gathering dust till 2016, when I picked it up and realized what its implications were. Not only did it reveal hitherto hidden and unmentioned local history, but in the process of doing that, it was the first systematic historiographic exposition written in accordance with accepted academic norms and connected to the internationally agreed corpus of knowledge currently available in this regard. Unfortunately, Professor Akhtar had succumbed to his disease 1 full year before I began my work on his book. It was my mission to take his work to its fruition, and I feel that I have succeeded. Before that, I had begun my initial forays as far back as 1991, but it was tantamount to groping in the dark. My genetic researches began in 2004, but it took several years before they would present a clear picture. I am happy to state that over the course of the last 6 years, my work has been published and publicized extensively on social media and the internet. It has spread out to others, attracted a following and colleagues, and has led to a general demand for serious inquiry, a proper awareness of historical issues, and a reawakening to accurate ethnic and cultural identifications. This in turn has generated the beginnings of Tajik political activism in Pakistan, which although as yet is embryonic but growing fast. We are reaching out to connecting with other Tajiks in the region. For the work of one man, this is quite an achievement, but perhaps it is defined well by the old adage which says that, quote, in the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, unquote. We will now consider how all the factors discussed above impinge on the current situation and its future prospects. Our breakthroughs in research coincide with a time of epochal global geopolitical change. The international order of power is undergoing convulsions. After true research, perhaps the most important factor for us is that of the geopolitical prospects. The chaotic situation of breakdown and decrepitude, which now surrounds us, is a direct consequence of the artificial territorial constructs called Afghanistan and Pakistan, put into place by the Anglo-American global interests in pursuit of their 200-year-old quote-unquote great game to confront Russia in this region of the world. They are ruled by parasite rentier elites who are sustained directly on financial and technological aid. In creating these arrangements, the global powers have ridden roughshod over ancient yet enduring ethnic and cultural identities, which still exist unacknowledged on the bedrock of level of society and refuse to vanish or acknowledge modern borders. Due to their inherent dysfunctionality, the modern structures have now become redundant and ruinous. The sorry hodgepodge of rampant corruption and low-grade historiography is the hallmark of such conditions. The most important factor for us is the rise to global prominence in Eurasia of Russia and China, who have a different approach to outstanding regional issues. That is a historically proven fact. The Atlantic or Western powers have now begun their global decline after a long innings at the hustings. America fled Kabul in defeat last year after spending 20 long years there propping up corrupt puppets, while Pakistan is literally crumbling under the duress of its own endemic culture of corruption and mismanagement. The focus of the renewed Western Russian competition has now shifted from the South and Central Asia directly to the European theatre, and therefore the great game is now obsolete, and its components are a costly liability for its Anglo-American perpetrators. On the regional level, the medieval Taliban are now back on the scene. They have taken over Afghanistan and are on the rampage in Khyber, Pakhtunkhwa. Many Tajiks on both sides of the Durand line are also involved with them. In the great game scenario, the Pashtuns and Afghans were pernicious beneficiaries who rented out their services to malevolent powers and conducted mischief on their behalf so that the latter could maintain their profitable stranglehold here. Corruption and nonsensical falsehood were tolerated to that end, over and above genuine social and cultural development and proper historical considerations. The changing conditions, therefore, are full of hope for all true Khorasanis. In conclusion, I will say that the crucial task is to uncover and promote the actual Iranic narrative of our ethno-cultural domain. It was fragmentary to begin with and never properly developed. That made the task easier for its enemies to disfigure and bury those fragments. It has taken detective work to unearth them, but the central corpus of knowledge does indeed exist and is in excellent shape the world over in its universities. Pashtuns, on the other hand, cannot trace their history reliably beyond the year 1500 of the Common Era. They remain undecided as to whether they are Aryans, Greeks or Hebrew. In that position, they are not even entitled to participate in discourses on such matters. The Saka predecessors of the Pashtuns have been long-standing residents of Khorasan, but have always remained in the shadows and on the peripheries of the mainstream Persian political influence, in accordance with their due status. It is only over the past 500 to 1,000 years that their influence has increased disproportionately and run amok, upsetting what was once a glorious dispensation. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope my talk has been meaningful. With this, I come to the end of my speech.